America is home to 33 million small businesses, the beating heart of communities across the country.
And proof that the American dream is still alive.
This is a show about those dreamers and doers and the communities they serve.
Their real life stories.
Their struggles and successes.
Their grit, determination, and passion.
And the people who fight
to keep their American dream alive.
I'm Alfredo Ortiz.
I'm Elaine Parker.
And it's time for another episode of Main Street Matters,
America's small business megaphone. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. I'm Elaine Parker, the president of the Job Creators Network Foundation.
And I'm Jordan Bruno, vice president of Job Creators Network.
Please subscribe to the show at salempodcastnetwork.com or wherever you get your podcasts from. Today, we're joined by Michelle Leopold. Michelle owns several Ace Hardware locations in the San Francisco Bay Area with her husband, Jeff, and business partner, Troy Welsh. But besides being a successful small business owner, Michelle is also an outspoken activist after her son, Trevor, died in his dorm room at Sonoma State University after taking a pill he thought was oxycodone. Instead, it was fentanyl. Michelle's here to talk about her story, her son, and how Gavin Newsom has ruined the lives for small business owners in the state of California. Michelle, thank you so much for joining us today, and I'm so sorry for your loss.
Thank you very much. Speaking out about Trevor is one of the ways I try and heal.
Well, why don't you share your son's story? Tell us about your son and tell us what happened to him.
Sure. Trevor was a beautiful boy. He loved nature. He was very inquisitive. He memorized different birds and different rocks. And we had a zoo growing up between dogs and rats and guinea pigs and lizards and frogs and all the insects that you use to feed them. It was a joyful family. We definitely thought of ourselves as very happy. And unfortunately, Trevor learned about marijuana his freshman year of college. And I immediately knew that the marijuana that he was smoking was nothing like I knew marijuana to be. There was no kumbaya. There was no easygoing mellowness. Trevor became violent. There are holes in our walls. There were holes in our computer screens, cell phones. He broke so much in the house. And I learned that today's marijuana is not just pot. That continued for his high school career. He was in and out of rehabs. Luckily, we were able to give him the support we thought he needed. But he did do well in school when he was sober and graduated from high school and was accepted to multiple Cal State universities. He chose to go to Sonoma State. At this point, I understand he was experimenting with higher highs. Marijuana was his drug of choice, but just like if I am normally a Chardonnay drinker, I might drink a margarita now and then, or, crazy nights might require shots. So that's what he was doing, is he was experimenting. And one of those weekends, he was experimenting with what these oxy pills were like. He and friends took them on Friday night. There were no consequences. This is in 2019, when the DEA was finding 1 out of 4 pills had a lethal amount of fentanyl in it. And apparently he and his friends took 3 on Friday night, and there was 1 left on Saturday. He took it Saturday night before he went to sleep. He had a friend over in his dorm, and that friend woke up next to a dead body the next morning. From that moment, I've been an outspoken advocate around the harms of fentanyl, but also using Trevor's life and death to hopefully prevent other parents from burying their children.
I'm so sorry. He sounds like a wonderful child who obviously, many times teenagers do those kinds of things and experiment. But yeah, I think you're right in how you describe things. It's marijuana is not the marijuana that you know we think of when we had friends growing up and knew people who smoked marijuana. It's not the same from what I understand.
Exactly. And I often say kids used to learn from their experimentation as teenagers. But sadly, now kids are dying from their experimentation and they don't even know. And that's what I try to do through my activism.
Wow. Yeah, that's a very powerful story. So what is if you could give us a little more background on your activism and how you're trying to prevent future families from going through this, which is, I think, over 100,000 overdoses every year, if that number is correct. So it's certainly something that's not rare.
Exactly. So it's twofold. Most of the year, I speak to young adults and their parents because those are my lived experiences. So that's the lane that I feel most comfortable talking in. And I also think it's an important demographic because these kids don't know. My stories usually involve just say KNOW instead of just say no, which didn't necessarily do a lot of good. But they need to be educated consumers if they are thinking about using drugs. They need to know what's out there. I share it's not just pot and explain what used to be 3 to 5% THC in the joints, what is now on average 15% or higher. And most young adults are looking for higher highs. And so they're using dab, butter, shatter, wax, vapes that can go up to 99% THC. So there's no comparison between 3% and 99%. And then, of course, one pill can kill, one line can kill. Sadly, that's the way Trevor died, and too many of my new friends in this activism arena didn't even know the word fentanyl before their child died from fentanyl poisoning. So that's what I do most of the year. The other important part, I decided 3 years ago to crash down the barriers between my activism and my work life. I still am the business owner. I'm the CMO of our 6 Ace Hardware stores. And I decided to honor both August 21st, Fentanyl Awareness Day, and August 31st, International Overdose Awareness Day, with a series of events at our Ace Hardware stores. We now have done this for 3 years. We have educated as many of our employees as possible on how to become first responders. If they see an overdose, they know how to use Narcan. And then we also have invited our community and our customers to get free Narcan and training on overdose. We call that the tools of fentanyl awareness and overdose prevention. So that used to be in 2 tidy compartments, but now I do. I have no persona as an activist and persona as work. Now it's all mixed together. And then it even got louder. Ace Hardware has a mini documentary series called Ace Hardware. And they show how so many Ace Hardware stores do more than just sell tools to their community. The first one that I remember seeing was about a man who came into his local hardware store because he needed a shovel. And the young man helping him said, "Oh, what are you digging?" He said, "I have to bury my best friend. My dog died." And the young man said, "Let me come over after work. I'm off at 5 and I'll come help you." Little things like that make Ace Hardware different than other hardware stores. We really are part of the community by being more than just within our four walls. And Ace asked me if I would like to do an Ace Hardware story on our efforts around disseminating the Narcan and education to our customers and our employees. And since that happened, the story's gone viral, and I'm really grateful for the exposure, and it's such an important message to get out there.
Clearly, this is such a difficult topic, and you must get so frustrated with politicians trying to campaign off banner solutions that don't really have any, that won't actually fix the problem. But do you have any suggested policy solutions for the drug crisis, overdose crisis?
Because I believe in education, I'm really grateful for the states, including California, that have passed mandatory education for young adults. I know that is a way to end this looking forward. I think that our Proposition 36 in California, if Californians vote yes on that, that will enable drug dealers to get drug court, which has gone away over the past several years, where instead of going to jail, they can get enrolled in 12-step classes, recovery programs, work programs to help them with their drug problems. And I think these are the types of changes that we need. We often say you can't Narcan your way out of this problem. You can't arrest your way out of this problem. There's a lot of tentacles to this horrific epidemic. We do have to work on all of them, but I do think that what the DEA is doing is probably the most important thing that a lot of people don't even know about. They are doing a lot of important work in arresting giant drug dealers and have been working on getting the two cartels that are responsible for this epidemic. So those are some of the things that I think are important. And it's going to be a problem that's here for a long time. I know that. So I do think that education is one of the most important things we need to do, because still there are people that don't know about fentanyl.
You know, this issue affects every state. I'm in Florida, across the country from you in Orlando, and we have a local story here by a fairly large developer, David and Jackie Siegel. Their daughter, Victoria, passed away from a fentanyl overdose in 2015, and it started the same activism, same kind of story I hear from you, sorry. And what they do is, I'm sure you may be familiar with Victoria's Voice
I read
Foundation.
the book.
Yeah. It's I mean, the good that's coming out of it is great. And obviously their focus is the education piece, obviously about what fentanyl is, how it gets into the country, how it makes its way to our children, and how important it is to get Narcan not only into the public's hands, but actually into the schools' hands, because some of these overdoses are happening in schools during school. What are some of your biggest challenges with getting Narcan into schools, into the hands of the public?
So California has mandated that. So it's already in our schools, but in what I know about the fentanyl deaths around young adults, it's after hours. Most of the fentanyl deaths are not happening at the schools, but it's after they leave school, and getting Narcan into their hands is so important. A lot of schools will not allow somebody like me to come in and distribute Narcan to the students. So trying to find other ways to get Narcan into young adults' hands. Last weekend, I spoke to a group of young men. They were all high school seniors, and I was grateful I could give all 25 of them a box of Narcan and teach them how to use it. That's the kind of backdoor messaging that needs to happen until the schools also allow us to distribute to colleges or to high schools. Colleges also, for instance, at Sonoma State, where Trevor died, they have free Narcan, but you have to get it through the school nurse at the student health center, which is great that it's there. And I just hope that everybody that needs it or might need it has already gotten it. But it's great to have it on demand also, not just when you have an appointment to go into a building. In Marin County, we have Narcan vending machines at multiple locations. And it's great because you can go and get Narcan anonymously there, which for especially young adults, in my opinion, is a big distraction to getting Narcan. There is a stigma still around having, even though it's a life-saving device, Narcan still is tied in with drugs. Unfortunately, a lot of young adults especially did not have a history of being in active addiction like Trevor. So there shouldn't be any stigma around having Narcan. As a hardware store owner, I often say when people buy a fire extinguisher at our ACE stores, we don't say, oh my gosh, they must have a arsonist living at their house. You're just getting something to help save lives. So that's the way that I would like to have Narcan perceived in the future. But getting it into more young adults' hands so they can be the first responders is one of the things I'm actively working on.
Well, I thank you for using your platform and Trevor's story, as well as your business, to raise awareness. I think it's just such an important message for people. And like I said, the four corners of the country are experiencing these types of tragedies. And it's people like you and carrying that message that can help at least stop maybe the next one from happening. So thank you so much for your efforts there.
Thank you.
Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about what it's like doing business in California. I mean, we hear the horror stories, but can you give a firsthand account of some of the challenge it is to be a business owner in California right now?
Proposition 47 was intended to reduce the population in California's prisons, which it did. But unfortunately, it's had negative consequences throughout California. As a small business owner in the San Francisco Bay Area, we have had to redo our stores with complete aisles being locked off, with different locking devices on certain products so they're not stolen, with magnetic tags and larger items that will beep when you walk through the door if they're not demagnetized. And that all has a cost, both to us and to the consumer. So since Proposition 47 was put on the ballot by Californians, it has to be removed by Californians. So that is why it is now Proposition 36 on California's ballots this coming November. There's also a drug component to it, which, of course, as Trevor's mom, I think is really important. I have been working on passing Alexandra's Law, which is an admonishment similar to the Watson admonishment that's given to drunk drivers, that if somebody is arrested for drunk driving, they need to know that they could be considered for vehicular manslaughter if this continues. Similarly, drug dealers should know that they could cause drug-induced homicide in the future. That's all that Alexandra's law is it's just a warning. It doesn't put anybody in jail, but it makes it easier for people to prosecute if people are repeat offenders. And that also is part of the shoplifting part, or the smash and grab part. A lot of those people are groups of people, or they're repeat offenders. It's not the one-offs.
Right. And how are these propositions polling? Do you think they have a good chance of passing? I mean, obviously, California is a difficult state to pass sensible policy in.
We have an excellent bipartisan support throughout California. Almost all of the big city mayors support it. Almost all of the district attorneys support it. So many small businesses like me support it. The pushback is coming from people who don't want the prisons to be full again. And that is not the intention of this. This is bringing back tougher penalties for these serial repeat smash and grab people or repeat offenders. So that is what we're hoping will change if Proposition 36 passes, to stop some of the people. And we have pictures. We know who these people are, but they know that nothing's going to happen if they steal less than $950. So we just tell them when we see them at our door, you're not allowed to come in here anymore. We'll call the police, but most of the time nothing happens.
Crime's been a big issue for small and large businesses around the country. We only hear in the news mostly about the larger companies. I think last fall, Target announced that they were closing about 9 stores in 4 states. We see videos of smash and grabs happening in, Home Depot, Walmart, Lululemon, high-end products, things like that. And we hear that on the news. But the small companies, the small businesses like yours that are affected by this crime, we decided to do some polling on it because we do poll our small business owners nationally. And we were surprised how high and how much it was impacting, neighborhood crime was impacting these businesses. 30% of them said that crime was actually impacting their revenues, their bottom line, because of the increase in costs for, like you said, the security, the way they had to sell their products, having security guards in the store, and to help protect their employees as well. Have you seen those types of costs increase for you as well?
Absolutely. And we can't absorb it all. And unfortunately, some of that cost is passed on to our consumers. It's very unfortunate. I wish there was some magic, something that we could do to avoid having our customers who aren't responsible having to help us pay for it. But the dollar amount is significant. I know we have a meeting tomorrow with our store managers, and one of their complaints is lack of a bonus because we didn't make our sales goals, and their bonuses are tied to sales goals, and we didn't make it. So it's one of those things, we'll apologize, but if there isn't any money to give for bonuses, there aren't going to be any bonuses. And that's where we're at. And we have some, sad employees because of that.
Switching gears on challenging issues for small businesses, still in the bucket of challenging issues. California is the first to pass a minimum wage of $20 an hour, but specifically for franchises in your state. How has that impacted you? And were you able to push back on it or be heard by the governor's office when he was considering signing something like this that so clearly targeted one industry, not one industry, but the franchise industry?
We look at what, especially In-N-Out Burger, is paying their employees when we do assessments of how much we're paying. San Francisco already had $18.67 an hour implemented. Oakland, where another one of our stores is at $16.50, and California wide, we're at $16. So the $20 was good to see, but for the most part, we don't employ people at minimum wage. And we definitely believe in a living wage in our 6 stores. We would much rather have people join us and stay with us for years or even decades, which I'm very grateful to say. We have a lot of employees who have been working for us for 5, 10, 20, 30 years, which is uncommon, I think, in the hardware business for sure. But it's because we believe in paying a fair wage. The minimum wage, the statewide minimum, or the countrywide minimum wage is atrocious, in my opinion. When I'm at Ace Hardware conventions and I'm talking to people from the middle of the country, I just am shocked that they are paying the minimum wage. So that is something I personally think it's important to pay a living wage.
Michelle, where can our listeners go to learn more about your efforts and your outspoken advocacy and activism and help out if possible?
Ace Hardware has a channel on YouTube. It's Ace Heartware. Like a heart. And on there, mine talks about stigma and ending the stigma. So you can search Michelle Leopold on Ace Hardware. And at the end of the Ace Hardware video, there's a link that goes to my website, which is not updated whatsoever, but there's a lot of helpful information on there. And that is, our website is wearenot-alone.community, and you need .community because .com is a Yeti organization. So .community is the key to finding me on the internet.
So Ace Hardware on YouTube and wearenot-alone.community online.
Correct.
Okay, great. Well, Michelle, we're so sorry for your loss, but thank you for all that you're doing to help other families so that they don't have to suffer the same kind of tragedy. Thank you so much for coming on Main Street Matters today and talking about your story and your business and some of the challenges that you're facing. And thank you all for tuning in and listening to Main Street Matters. Main Street Matters is part of the Salem Podcast Network, and new episodes debut every Wednesday and Friday. You can subscribe to salempodcastnetwork.com or wherever you get your podcast from, and we'll be back soon with another episode.